When you've been in therapy as long as I have, you develop some pretty strong opinions about the different types of therapy out there. So I thought it could be fun if I made one of those tier list videos where I basically organize all of the different therapy modalities that I have tried into different tiers from F to S. If you're new around here, hi, hello, my name is Megan, and I am an auDHD life coach for people who are autistic and ADHD like I am, and I have been in therapy for over a decade now. I started therapy when I was 19 years old, and I have been in it pretty consistently ever since. Now, I haven't tried every therapy modality out there, so if you don't see one that you particularly love or hate on here, my apologies, I just haven't tried it, or I forgot about it, if we're being honest. And also, I just want to put out a big disclaimer here that this is meant to be entertainment only. I am not a therapist. I am not saying that any of these therapy modalities are bad. In fact, some recent research is showing that the modality doesn't even matter that much. What matters the most is your relationship with your therapist. If you trust your therapist, and if therapy is working for you, then fuck my tier list. Honestly, ignore everything I'm about to say. This is only meant to be fun. So with all of that said, let's get started with F tier. If you're new to these kinds of videos, F tier is the worst tier. This is the stuff that doesn't rank very well in your view. And for me, we gotta start with cognitive behavioral therapy. Now, some of the therapy modalities that I'm going to mention later in this video that are much higher up on the tier list are loosely based or inspired by CBT, but I find them more effective than just your base cognitive behavioral therapy. I really hate CBT for me. I love when it works for other people, and I think that's amazing. And I think it has a really unique purpose, but a lot of therapists and insurance companies are trying to extrapolate that and force CBT to work in situations where it just doesn't work. Primarily, cognitive behavioral therapy is designed to help treat acute mental health problems as opposed to chronic ones. And in my experience, cognitive behavioral therapy is not great at taking trauma into account, which I definitely have, which honestly, most of us have if we're being real. It's very hard not to be traumatized by late stage capitalism, which is what we're living under. One of my biggest issues with CBT is the way that they talk about cognitive distortions. Now, believe me, I have had my fair share of cognitive distortions. I just never found CBT helpful in dealing with them. Because CBT's solution for when your thoughts are distorted is like, oh, well, just like don't distort them though. And I don't find that helpful. If I could, I would, you know? Plus, a lot of times my distorted thoughts actually make sense if you look at the input. And that's the thing, CBT doesn't do a lot of looking at your past. It's all about fixing the things in the present, which I do understand, but a lot of times your past informs how you got to your present, you know? And when CBT looks at my current present thoughts out of the context of my past trauma, my current present thoughts can look erroneous, false, distorted, when in reality, they make perfect sense given what I've been through. And therefore, a lot of the treatment that CBT would prescribe, like thinking happier thoughts or arguing with the distorted thoughts even, is super not helpful. And it goes deeper than the fact that CBT itself isn't helpful. I think the type of therapist who does CBT is also usually not helpful for me. Because the type of therapist who chooses to do cognitive behavioral therapy often is a little invalidating because CBT is invalidating, and they're drawn to that because they think the answer to mental health problems is to invalidate them. And I know that I'm oversimplifying, but I'm sorry. Every single cognitive behavioral therapist I've had, except for one, has really traumatized me, actually. You can check out more about that over here if you like. All right, I'm done shitting on cognitive behavioral therapy. It honestly works really well for so many people, and I so appreciate that. It just really didn't help me. The other therapy modality that I'm going to put in F tier is meditation. Now, I will say if I'm allowed to include walking meditations or like other mindfulness exercises, then it moves up to C tier all the way. But if you're telling me I have to sit down with my feet on the floor and deep breathe and view my thoughts as leaves swirling in a river, like I am either gonna fall asleep, I'm gonna have an existential crisis because I don't think the thoughts are the leaves. I think I'm the leaves and the thoughts are the river. And what does that mean? Or I'm gonna get bored and think about something else. Like, it just doesn't help me to sit here and try to visualize that stuff. Now, walking meditation gives me something to do with my body, so it lets some of the restless energy out, and therefore I can focus on what you're saying. And I do find that a little more helpful. And I do really appreciate certain mindfulness exercises like mindful eating, where you just eat very, very slowly and you consider the way things look and feel, and in addition to how they taste. That can be really helpful for me. And then this is like the craziest mindfulness exercise I've ever heard of, and I love it. You want to look around. I want you to pick 3 objects. Okay, do you see 3 objects? Now, each one, start with the first one, look at it, and I want you to imagine what it would feel and taste like to put it in your mouth. Can you imagine what it tastes like? Have you ever put something like that in your mouth? How do you know what that tastes like? That's crazy to me. That blows my mind. I love it. It's my favorite like self-soothing tool now. As for D and C tier, I actually have no therapy modalities in there. I really tend to either love or hate stuff, so there's not a lot of middle ground. I loathe CBT, I loathe basic meditation, so those are an F, but D and C tier are empty. So next up in B tier, we have something called Dialectical Behavioral Therapy. This is in B tier for a couple of reasons, mostly because when it was first introduced to me, it was really, really useless and terrible and invalidating, and I hated it, but it has moved up significantly in my esteem since I've gotten on the right medication, received the correct diagnoses, and now I can use its tools more effectively. Basically, I don't think DBT is great if you're in a crisis, which is interesting because it was literally developed to help highly suicidal people who are obviously usually in crisis. But I found that when I was in crisis, DBT is largely about making better decisions and being more effective in your life, affecting change on the environment around you. And when I'm in crisis, I need to affect some change in my emotional world first before I can even bother with like the quote unquote real world. And not everybody is like that, clearly, because DBT is a super effective and amazing treatment option for highly suicidal people. But it just really didn't work for me. I especially found the idea of opposite action, which is one of the skills they teach you in DBT, really invalidating because I was so traumatized and repressing so much of myself. I was masking so hard that I felt like I was always doing opposite action, which is like, when you have a self-destructive urge, you do the opposite of what the urge is telling you to do. So if the urge is telling you to cause yourself harm, then you go and do something nice for yourself. I was doing that all the time. I felt the urge to stim, I repressed it. I felt the urge to dance, I stood very still. I felt the urge to read about my special interest, I went and did something productive. You know, I was always doing opposite action. I needed permission to be myself before DBT could be helpful to me. Now that I know that I'm autistic and ADHD and have OSDD, now that I understand those diagnoses and understand myself within them, I am much more able to use DBT skills, including opposite action. I have learned that you don't apply opposite action in every situation. You only apply opposite action to self-destructive urges. If this isn't making sense, it's because I'm not really explaining what DBT is. It's dialectical behavioral therapy is really rooted in dialectics. Dialectics is the understanding that two opposing things can be true at once. So it can be true that I hate myself, and it can be true that I love myself. It can be true that I had a traumatic childhood, and it can be true that I had a beautiful childhood. And that is the stuff I find really helpful now. If you want to learn more about dialectical behavioral therapy, or if you want to learn about Marsha Linehan, the psychologist who created it, I really recommend her memoir, Building a Life Worth Living. It's definitely a little old school. Marsha Linehan is older, and she definitely is a little old school, but it's also really beautiful. So I will link that with my shop link somewhere. Next up, we have A tier, which has one therapy modality as well, which is EMDR therapy. EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, and it's basically when you experience bilateral stimulation and attempt to reconcile some of the emotions that are tied to your trauma. So I just said a lot of things. Let's break that down. Bilateral stimulation can look like lots of things. Some therapists use butterfly tapping, where you tap back and forth. This is what me and my therapist do because we're virtual. But if you're in office, some therapists have these little vibrating devices that you hold one in each hand and they vibrate back and forth. Some therapists have a light bar and a light will move back and forth. The idea is you just want to, like it says, bilateral stimulation, stimulate each side of your body going back and forth. And then while you're doing this, you want to try to process the emotions that were caused by your trauma. Some therapists will have you go through the traumatic thing itself, but in my experience, we haven't necessarily done that because my trauma was like death by 1,000 paper cuts. You know, it was lots of small things. Reliving one specific instance wasn't going to get at the heart of what was wrong. It was the buildup over years, you know? And so instead, when I do EMDR, we try to tap into the part of me that feels ashamed. Shame is the number one result of my trauma. I think probably most trauma, but definitely my trauma. And in these EMDR sessions, I mean, I won't go into them explicitly because they're very intense and very emotional, but in these EMDR sessions, we address the part of me that feels ashamed, and we basically tell her that I understand why you feel ashamed. It makes sense. You're coming to a logical conclusion, and also I love you anyway, and also you're safe now, and also like sort of that dialectics piece again, you know? And the reason this is only an A tier and not an S tier is because EMDR is very, very intense. Even when you don't relive the actual traumatic event, it's a lot. And it can really wipe you out for the rest of the day, the rest of the week, sometimes the rest of the month. So you just have to be really prepared for that. And I am. My therapists have all done a great job of making sure I know that. And they've done a great job in building up trust and rapport before we even start that kind of therapy. But it is a lot. It's very intense. And finally, in S tier, we have two modalities here. We're gonna start with something called EFT tapping. I love EFT tapping. I love it so much. It's one of those things that sounds absolutely out there and banana pants, but it totally works. And there's also a ton of science supporting the idea that it works. So even though it sounds out there and like maybe a little new agey, in reality, it is very, very grounded in science and effective medicine. So what is EFT tapping? EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques, and EFT tapping is when you tap really specific spots, and as you do, you talk about your difficult emotion. Like I said, it sounds out there, and it is supported by traditional Chinese medicine. According to traditional Chinese medicine, the places that you are tapping are meridian points, and meridian points are spots where energy can get stuck, and the flow of energy is really important to health in traditional Chinese medicine. So when you tap on these spots, you are encouraging the energy to flow, and that can increase health. And then by talking through the difficult thing, that helps you too. But this is also supported by Western medicine as well. There are studies showing that it's very effective in helping treat trauma and anxiety. And the reasoning for that is that when you tap these spots, you are triggering the parasympathetic nervous system, which is basically the opposite of fight or flight, which keeps you very calm while you talk through something upsetting so that you don't get like agitated and dysregulated. You can stay calm and feel the emotions, and that allows you to really process them. I love EFT tapping. It is so effective. It is so helpful. When my old therapist first told me about EFT, I was so mad because I was like, look, I'm pouring my soul out to you. I'm telling you about all of this trauma, all of this horrible shit, and you're telling me I should tap my face. Like seriously? You sound like a Karen telling me to do yoga. But that shit works. It works so well. So I do it all the time now. And that's the cool thing about EFT is you can do it yourself. You don't need to do it with a therapist, although therapist-guided EFT can be super helpful too. Finally, the last therapy modality I'm going to put on this tier list is internal family systems. Now, internal family systems sounds like it's like family-based therapy, like you bring your parents and your siblings and all that stuff, but that's actually not what it is. IFS is based on your internal family, the family of parts that exist within you. Now, I have OSDD, which is a dissociative disorder, and some plural folks actually find IFS confusing or unhelpful because IFS is more about like the metaphor of having parts. Like there are parts of you who feel protective and parts of you who are exiled and parts of you who are managers and all that stuff. But with OSDD or DID, we have actual different like consciousnesses. And so IFS can be confusing for some dissociated systems, but for me, it's been very, very helpful. Understanding my parts has given me permission to be all of myself. Like, I no longer feel like I have to be one consistent way in order to be validated or in order to be good. Instead, I know that I'm allowed to experience the feelings that an exile part feels and also use the parts of my manager to like keep doing daily life stuff. And I understand that my protector parts might be mean to me in an effort to try to protect me from others who are going to be mean to me. There's really no good way for me to explain how powerful IFS is, except to say that I no longer feel allergic to myself. I used to feel like every part of me was fighting with each other, and like I was literally allergic to being myself. Like I had negative body and mind reactions when I tried to be myself. And now I know that there's lots of ways to be myself, and I'm okay with most, if not all of them. So I'm fairly certain these are all of the therapy modalities that I personally have tried, but I know there are tons more out there. So let me know in the comments your favorite or least favorite types of therapy. I would love to hear about it. And I will see you all next week.